Welcome back to the Pastor Pod. So glad you're with us for another episode. Man, we're at episode 40, and Jay, we're here. This has been a great journey. We've reached the mountaintop. Now we're going to be over the hill after this episode.
40 weeks. That's a long time.
That's a lot. That's a lot of talking.
40 episodes. It's great. That's great. And I think I it's kind of fun. We're going back to kind of maybe some today we're going to be looking at some foundational kind of things, some good things. And you were joking. We're like, hey, yeah, today's just like a normal day in our conversations because, our text threads or whatever it may be, this is just what we talk about, pastoring and things of that sort. And so,
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to vision and building a team around a vision. And so that's kind of where we're jumping in today on the podcast. And so, Josh, I know you, I think one of the things when we were planning this, one of the things I was intrigued by is I know you've been personally, you and the team there at the Bridge have been really working through a process of making sure the team's all on the same page and moving the same direction. And I think many pastors, this is where I fall in this camp. I believe a lot of pastors, one, they don't even know when, they're not, it's not on the radar. They're very busy. Pastors are very busy. And I don't want to underestimate what pastors do. A lot of pastors, there's the day in and day out grind of, following up with people, loving on people, shepherding the flock. And then there's the sermon prep, and there's lots of things that are going on, lots of different moving parts. And this idea of like, well, now I got to set aside time to make sure the vision's set together and building a team around a vision. It can be cumbersome. It can be overwhelming. And so, Josh, I think just on the outside listening in and watching you guys, I was intrigued enough to go, hey, we should talk about that. Because I believe a lot of pastors could benefit from just your journey and maybe even the learning from, you and others that kind of go through. This is kind of the world that I love to live in when it comes to vision and casting vision and talking about vision and rallying a team around it. So good, fun conversation, I think, to be had on this topic. And so if you're listening in today and you're going, hey, I'd love to take my church to the next level and I'm not really sure what steps to take. Maybe, Josh, today you're going to solve everybody's problems. That's what's going to happen.
Or I'll confuse everybody. I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Everything you just said, I resonated with. And if you're a pastor or a leader, or you serve faithfully in your church, you get like how much goes into being the body of Christ, like being on mission, right? Serving your neighbor, sharing your faith, inviting people to church, leading a Bible study, preaching, teaching, caring for the hurting. So yeah, I get that. I think for me and Jay, I could speak for Jay, like we bleed this stuff. We talk all the time, our text messaging, our phone calls, even before we record our podcast, we're talking about how do we help the church? How do we help people live on mission? How do we help the church be as effective as possible so that God gets the most glory and more people are impacted and saved and restored? So when it comes to building a team around a vision, really this whole podcast really was birthed out of me and Jay having a lot of these conversations and saying, let's just talk about it on the air and let's learn and let's invite other people into the conversation. So this podcast is really all about leaders sharing their heart so we maximize our leadership, because God has given us a place. God has given us a calling. All of us have different giftings and wirings from God. And so really building a vision and building a team around a vision is knowing your gifting, knowing how God's wired you and how you play a part in the body of Christ. So that's of course a given. But for us here at the Bridge, if you don't know my story, I moved here in March 2020, sold our house. Our house was a contingent offer on a house here in Venice, and all that was one side fell through in Jacksonville. We had to reevaluate. God worked it out. And we met the church online only. You can go back to an earlier episode. I actually shared the whole detailed story of us moving. So I don't want to belabor all that. But when we came to the Bridge, it's a wonderful gospel-centered church. The people are wonderful. They had been through a lot over the last few years prior to me coming. And then, of course, COVID hit. And so we moved locations. We're a portable church. And with the 2020, 2021, those COVID was supposed to be like a 3-month thing apparently at the beginning, but it turned into this 2-year thing. It gave us an ability to go, okay, we can't get together physically in some ways. And I know everywhere where we all live, it was different for you. Like for you, Jay, it was different than me in Florida, right? A lot more difficult for you guys than it was for us. But at the end of the day, it gave us an ability to go to the drawing board. Okay, what are the things we're doing that we don't need to do anymore when we do meet again? What are the things that are not mission critical? What are maybe some programs or some systems or some ways that we've been doing things that we could actually look at it and go, we're going to try to become more laser focused on our mission. And so that's kind of when it began, when we started really looking at everything we're doing and saying, how do we do it more effectively, but also what can we cut out that's not helping people find and follow Jesus?
So let me ask you. So I know COVID. You mentioned COVID was kind of a big an opportunity maybe to highlight this, but you know. So that's what happened in your story, is that COVID circumstances led to an evaluation that took place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you think many pastors and most pastors have those aha moments? I mean, we all did, a couple years ago when COVID started.
Right.
But then we get into the grind of just doing it and laboring it through it. Do you believe? I'm not really sure where I stand. I'm not sure how many pastors sit down and actually really constantly reevaluate direction, vision, thoughts of that sort. Do you think that's a funk we can easily find ourselves in, or do you think I'm kind of just speaking off the wall?
No, you're dead on, Jay. I mean, I was thinking about just my week. You go from a meeting to then a call, and then you're studying, and then you have a family in need, and then then you're trying to plan 6 months ahead for this big event, and then you're trying to respond to an email of someone that's upset about something that happened to them and their family. And so, yeah, I mean, as pastors, we're like ping pong balls, like in a ping, we're just back and forth, back and forth. But there's seasons where we need to say, and I don't mean 2020. I think number one, we had to reevaluate because none of us had
Everybody
ever
did.
walked through that. So we're all in the
Everybody
same
did.
boat. Like nobody knew what we're doing. There was no books written about it. Now there's probably like 50 books written about like what
Of
to
course,
do.
there's
Yeah, and
absolutely
they're trying to go on a book tour or something. But nobody knew, and it humbled us and it brought us to a place of what is that we need to do to care for people, because it's been a hard couple of years, and I've lost friends, and I know many of you listening, it's been just a deep depression and a lot of isolation. So I don't speak to this as, oh, it's a great opportunity to try new things, but
right.
also looking at it saying, how do we make the most of our time as a church? How do we make the biggest impact in people's lives? So, yeah, but I do think there's a season that, and I've heard it said this way: you need to work in the ministry and you need to work on the ministry. You need to spend time working in the ministry of caring for the needs, writing the sermons. But there's a day or a time of the week that you pull away and you look at the overall strategy. You look at what you've been doing. You look at the calendar of the church. You ask the questions, the hard questions. You get a group of people that you trust around you and say, hey, where do you think we're doing well? Where do you think we're struggling? How do we move forward? How do we make a bigger difference? Man, we want to baptize more people. We want to see more people get into small groups. We want to see more people leading. Those are the kind of questions that really energize a team to start thinking vision than just thinking maintenance. And I think what happened when COVID hit, and I would say this is true probably in most churches, is it shocked the system. We'd never been down this road before, and probably everybody had a sermon in January of 2020 called 2020 Vision, right? I mean, almost every church had like this cool graphic, 2020 Vision, where we're going this year. I mean, how many churches did not fulfill what they thought they were going to fulfill in 2020?
Hmm.
Right? Because we didn't know it was coming. But God still is faithful and He worked through all of it. But I think you have to start asking those questions: where are we at? Are we okay with where we're at? And I think at the end of the day, as pastors, leaders, we can never become comfortable and settled to just say, my goal is just to hit autopilot, kick back, and just go through the motions. I think that is why many churches and many pastors are struggling and having a hard time with vision, because honestly, they've learned how to create this kind of easy going, let's just keep things moving, let's just kind of plan the services and just not push too hard, and
Well,
that's
right.
unhealthy.
And I do agree. And again, I want to encourage. It's not that when I say vision or change vision or whatnot, it's not that you need to change the direction of the vision every year in order to accomplish what I think it's more along the lines of like
Yeah.
you need to modify, you need to update, you need to, every how often do our phones update? We get a
Mhm.
software update. right? We need to do an update on our, making sure it clicks. And like you just said, in 2020, January 2020, we all had a vision. Most churches said, hey, this is what we're going to do and what we're going to accomplish. We had to shift based off
Mm-hmm.
circumstances. I think every year there's an opportunity for you to do that. I think there's these seasons of ministry, and maybe you can mark it on your calendar and go, hey, I just want to sit down, spend some time, get away, spend some time
Mm-hmm.
with the Lord, and say, hey, God, tell me, direct me, show me.
Yeah.
If I'm wandering off into a direction I shouldn't go, let me know. I want to be in step with what you're doing. Now, you mentioned a couple times, rallying the team, doing the team. When you talk about team, Josh, I know there at the bridge you have staff, correct? You have,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how
Yeah.
many staff you have. How many staff you have?
Um, it's
I put them on the spot. I
we're
know.
at we're looking for
A
the
youth.
next student pastor. So if there's anyone listening that knows some great, it's time to apply. But yeah, I would say 9 staff, and we have some part-time folks as well. And I think at the end of the day, like, not everyone's in every meeting, because sometimes it's a
Right.
brainstorm, sometimes it's big picture with like our leadership team, which is a smaller group of our staff. And then there's times where the elders are brought in, and we bring it to them and say, hey, what are your thoughts, and where do you think we should go here, or what are some of our God-sized goals and dreams? But as the person in the lead chair, whoever that is, you have to really keep continually thinking about the big picture of the church and saying, at the end of the day, let's just break it down. If you were to poll your staff or poll your leadership team, or if you're a church planner and you have a volunteer team, if you sat them around in a circle and said, what's the purpose of the church? What's the mission of the church? Or what's the goal of the church? What are they going to say? And I think you
How many
probably
different
have a
answers
lot
would
of,
you get?
you probably would get like some decent, like in the same ballpark, but I would probably guess you're going to find people that you thought were like locked into your vision and mission that are going to say all kinds of stuff. So that's
Right.
one way to find out if everybody has the same, you're aligned together on the same vision. Now, is there like a bunch of applications of the vision? Yeah, there's all kinds of ways we apply the mission and meet people's needs. That's not what I'm saying, but like, if they can't give a clear great commission, great commandment answer, and that we're called to make disciples of all the nations, if that's foggy, even with us as if we're unsure, if we're uncertain of like why our church is in our community, that to me is where that's the angst, that's the fuel of why we renew a vision. And if you feel like your church, the people are just there and they're just coming and then they go home, no one lingers after church and talks, there's no new group starting, there's really, if there's no movement,
Mhm.
um then I think for all of us, we that's a warning light built in by God to say, hey, are we on mission with God? And I think it doesn't just mean when those things are happening, you could be doing a lot of things and not have a good vision as well. But I think at the end of the day, what is the vision? What is the mission of the church? That's a great starting point with your
Right.
team.
Well, and there's lots of different resources available to help
Mm-hmm.
you with this. I mean, I think resources are not in there's not a small amount of them. There's more than you could possibly use to resource you and your team and your staff in order
Mm-hmm.
to rally around this, right? You
Mm-hmm.
and I are both familiar with a lot. We could drop a lot. We've had different leaders
Yeah.
on the podcast. Mac Lake was one who shared some of his tools that he uses and things of that sort. And so resources are not necessarily the tension point, Josh. What I would love to hear though is who do you think needs to be around the table when you're doing this? Like you said, not everybody has to be in every meeting, but who do you start with? And then maybe it bubbles over into a bigger group, bigger group. But maybe for you, could you walk us through when when you're coming into the bridge, knowing, hey, look, we want to make sure we tighten up our vision, our mission, where we're heading.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you go to first? Who was the first people you went to and said, hey, let's talk through this and make sure we're moving in the right direction. Who's that first group,
Yeah.
and then where did
Mm-hmm.
it go from there? Who did it expand to? And maybe
Yeah.
even land where you're at now. Like, where are you at now? I know there's a larger group that's involved now. So
Yeah. I want to say this really first. The church I'm at, and I'm sure if you're listening, your church, every church has a mission and they're doing awesome things. And so when I came to the
yes,
bridge, they have
absolutely.
been a faithful just giving, loving church for many years. When I say vision, I'm not saying, oh, well, Josh moved to Venice, Florida and went to a mountaintop or went out to the beach on the island. And God, through a dream, gave him this perfect strategy statement, perfect mission statement. And only he and he alone
Right.
can have a vision. I think that is number one. We have a weird culture now where the lead pastor, whoever whatever title you give that person, is treated like they're the only person that can create and understand vision. I think that's a big. I think we need to own it, but we also need to develop it in a collaborative way to build team. And
100%.
so we came to our, my leadership team that's on our staff, of course, our elders. We talked about where we are, where do we want to go, what kind of church do we want to continue to be, how do we get better, how do we make a bigger difference for the Lord. Of course, then we started thinking about a building process and raising money, and so all that'll really wake you up and say, okay, what's our clear vision? Because people give to vision, they don't just give to buildings or give to a project. And so I feel like it's putting together a plane in the air some days. Building a vision isn't this perfect little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like Jay said, there's some great tools that we've been using, whether it's Vision Frame, whether it's Leadership Pipeline, or just simply asking questions. Like if your key staff and leaders are not on the same page, uh, that's where you start. And then you start teaching it. So we began to teach sermon series on why we're here. We did a series called Welcome Home, where we taught just the foundational truths of like, who is the church? What does it mean to serve? What does it mean to give? Why do we go? Why do we plant churches? Why do we go on missions? I mean, we assume, I think, so many times in church that people understand the basics. And I think
Hmm.
when I assume everybody knows the story of Daniel, or yeah, everybody's heard the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. No, people have probably heard their side of it. They probably don't. Even church people that grew up in, like, we don't start, your starting point shouldn't be, well, everybody knows the mission of the church. Oh yeah, everybody gets that. No, ask the question and just see what happens. And you will probably be surprised at where everybody's all over the place. It doesn't mean that what they're saying is wrong in the sense that it has biblical truth, but what is the mission of, like, what is our bullseye? And so
Right.
that's kind of where we started. And then we began to look at everything we were doing and then saying, okay, is this great commission? Is this great commandment? Is this move the ball down the field? Does this make a difference in leading people to Jesus and helping them follow Jesus? And if it was like, yeah, I don't really know, we just do this thing and we enjoy doing it, but we're funding it, but we don't really know if there's any type of life change. It's like, well, it helps us know which things to fuel and which things to slowly let it just kind of ride out. And it's,
Right.
a lot of people call it the sacred cows in the church,
Right.
and
And I
every
think
church has them.
yeah, there's a lot of assumptions that we make as pastors, and that maybe is what gets us in
Mm-hmm.
the deepest trouble is those assumptions. We assume everybody's on the same page. We assume everybody knows the story we're going to teach. I think one of my biggest pet peeves is when a pastor stands up to preach and says, "Now, I know you've heard this story before. There's probably at least a handful of people in that
A
church who probably
handful.
never heard that story before."
We alienate people that didn't grow up in church when we do that, and then it also makes those that grew up in church think they actually do know the story when they don't.
Right. And then
Like,
not only that, but you've heard this, maybe even so. I preached through the book of Daniel a
mm-hmm.
couple months ago, and yes, there were people who have read the book of Daniel, even whatever. But again, it's one of those things of, oh, I need to be reminded of that. I need to be seen. I
Mm-hmm.
need to remember that because
Yeah.
again, I read it so long ago. It's been so long since I read it. I think the same thing goes for our vision of the church or direction
Mm-hmm.
where we're going. People need to be reminded of it. They
Mm-hmm.
need to know what it is, and that comes down to not just vocally but visually. How are you communicating? There's many ways you can
Yeah.
communicate, but you need to over communicate. There's an old thing that they say in worship leader world, and I'm stepping out of my limb here, so I'm my league here. So if you're a worship leader, pastor, director, creative arts director, whatever title you go by, um, if you are listening, there's this thing, I get sick. They're like, I get sick of singing that song. It's when you get sick of singing the
Yep.
song that people are just getting used to it, right?
That's
There's this
true.
old saying with that. I think the same goes with our vision. You get sick of talking about it to the point where like people are like, oh, I'm just not getting it. Okay, now
I
I get it,
understand it.
because you've communicated it so much. And it's not just you. And hear me, I don't it's not just you that has to communicate. It's not just the guy with the microphone on a Sunday morning that needs to communicate it.
Hmm.
It needs to be
Hmm.
communicated. Your vision needs to be communicated
Yeah.
from every single person that is closely connected to your church, members,
Hmm.
partners, whatever you call them, your
Yeah.
leaders, all your key leaders, whether they're paid or not. If they are in a position of leadership, or a someone who serves at the church, they should know why they're doing it. Why does
Hmm.
everything I do accomplish the vision of the church? The more you can tie it all back to that vision,
Hmm.
the greater buy-in and the greater impact that vision is going to have on everyday people who attend the church. And so that's why this is so vital. I think this is why I bleed it. This is why I talk so much about it. This is why it's so important, because it creates the culture in which the church lives and the
Yeah.
church thrives. It creates it. And so pastors, again, I'll go back to what I started with. They're busy, they're working through, there's ping pong balls, they're everywhere, they're doing all these things.
Hmm.
So Josh, how can we support, and how can we encourage pastors to begin this process? And what does a process look like to even consider what is the vision? Are we all on the same page of the vision?
Hmm.
Asking those simple questions. And again, every church has some form of vision, but maybe it's a statement that was created decades ago that no one's ever, it was because you needed it on a piece of paper
Right.
somewhere in your
Right.
articles of whatever,
Yeah.
your bylaws somewhere that says that. But what
So
is
yeah.
that?
So I would say for you as a leader, what is your preferred future for your church? If you could paint a picture of, man, the kind of church we want to be, or I can see a church that could be doing X, Y, Z. If, what would you say? If you were to sit back and dream and say, okay, we're a church plant, or we're a church that's been here a long time and we need to be renewed, or we're a church that's growing and we need to make sure we're really discipling people and not just leading people to a decision only. You've got to ask that question: what's the preferred future? And I would say find some tools, and I would say find some coaching. For me, I've got, of course, UJ, and then some other really incredible friends that have coached me along we're developing the vision frame, which is basically the mission, values, strategy, and what am I forgetting, Jay? Well, the vision is the preferred future. That's kind of the vision frame, but we've been developing that, teaching it as we go. This fall, we're going to unroll a series called We Are TBC, and we're going to say, this is our mission, this is our values, and this is our strategy. This is how we make disciples. This is our big picture next steps. We want every disciple to take a step in, because when we believe, and when you apply the word of God in these ways, it's going to help you grow in maturity, and then also help you make disciples who make disciples. And so for us, it's not just a sermon series. It's not just a piece of paper. It's not just a cool visual on a marker board. We want the vision to be owned and everybody carry that vision. That ultimately, it's not Josh's vision. It's not the Bridge Church's vision. Ultimately, it's what Jesus said we should be doing. And it's taking the Great Commandment and the Great Commission and applying it in my context. So,
Yeah.
so in essence, I don't need to go on a retreat and figure out what in the world the church should be doing. Now, I'll say this: I need to say, what did Jesus call me to do, and the way that He called me to do it, and how can I do that effectively in Venice, Florida, in Northport, in the Southwest Florida, and you the same in Boston or Orlando or wherever you live. That's where it becomes unique. But I do think there's a confusion. I think in the church world, I grew up and going to all these conferences as a pastor's kid, and everybody had all these weird visions. And I'm like, is it really our job to come up with what the church should be about? Or is it Jesus is the leader of the church? He's already set the tone. He's already said, go and make disciples of all the nations. And you need to go, you need to baptize, and you need to teach them to obey. Oh, and remember, I have all authority. And also, hey, don't forget, I'm never going to leave you or forsake you. Apply that? How do I live it out in my community? And so, and I'll also say this: I really think it's not just the Great Commission. I think it's fulfilling the Great Commission in a Great Commandment way, loving God and loving people like He loves people. I think when you do that, and then you get creative with how you apply that, man, it's exciting when your team can start to work together, collaborate, dream together. What could God do in the years ahead if we can be laser focused on this vision that Jesus has given us, but we make it understandable, and we give people handles in our church where we live, where they can understand this isn't just like the church vision. This is a Christ followers mission to make disciples. I am the church. I don't just go to church. I get to
Right.
live this out, in every way.
It's that contextualization that is extremely important. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
you can look at Paul's letters to the churches that he wrote to, right?
Mm-hmm.
The what he's communicating to them all is the same: is uphold the truth of the
Mm-hmm.
gospel, stand firm on the truth of the gospel. But contextually, there were different areas and they were going through different
Mm-hmm.
things. And knowing your area, knowing your context, knowing the people you're reaching is vital to how it plays out. But you're absolutely right. The vision, the mission of the church was given to us already. We don't have to be too creative in that. Our creativity, what we're trying to come through with is and come around and rally around is how do we do that in our local community where God has placed us, in our
Yeah.
neighborhoods and our workplaces, and
Yeah.
how do we uniquely do that here, in Venice,
Mm-hmm.
Florida, or Boston,
Mm-hmm.
or wherever you may be. And so
Mm-hmm.
extremely important. I think that the big overarching theme, and what we've communicated here is if we're gonna build a team around a vision,
Mm-hmm.
it starts with us acknowledging the importance of that truth, that like, hey, I don't need to
Mm-hmm.
do this alone. There's
Mm-hmm.
a vision that we're supposed to be on, and I need to rally the people
Yeah.
around that. It's our job to rally the people around that as lead
Yeah.
pastors, as pastors, as leaders. We got to rally. And then that even goes down to if you're the leader in your kids ministry, it's your job to rally your team, your teachers, your volunteers around that vision, that direction, to where everybody's on the
So
same page.
I'll give an example. We had we're planning some men's outreaches and men's events, and really just getting men into community. And we had a great meeting the other night with some great key leaders, and we're talking about like the mission and what's the purpose of this night and how we're going to, and I simply just changed our mission statement from helping people find and follow Jesus Christ here and around the world to helping men find and follow Jesus. I said, guys, we don't have to create another purpose statement for every ministry in our church. Every ministry in the church, yes, there's tons of applications. There's a lot more that we do, but the most important thing we do is lead men to Christ and also help them follow Christ. I said, if there's anything beyond that, we've kind of missed the point, because you can't disciple someone to grow spiritually if they don't have the Holy Spirit of God at salvation. They don't know Jesus. So, just as simple as that is, I think we get so confused, and every ministry in the church has 5 different purpose statements, and then we wonder why people are foggy. As I remember, we were in Costa Rica one year, and we were coming down off this huge mountain in this bus, and it was foggy. We're going to the airport, and I don't know how the bus driver could see. And this is, small roads. The bus is huge. There's no railing, and it's 3 a.m, and he's going real slow, and you could barely see about 3 inches ahead because it was so thick. And that imagery stuck with me because I prayed a lot on that drive.
Of course you did.
I had like 35 teenagers and their parents, and we're trying to make it home safely. But it really reminded me of, a lot of times that's what leadership feels like. We're trying to lead through all these crazy turns and the confusion and not knowing what to do next. But when we came down off the mountain and we hit the sun really popped up, all the fog, was burned away, and it was smooth sailing to the airport. And I think what vision does, and developing a vision does, is it gives you crystal clear clarity to be able to say to your church, say to your leaders, hey man, this is what we're all about, man. We are all about making disciples of all the nations. We're going to be a church that reaches people. We want to help people grow, whatever phrasing you come up with, because with that, it not only helps propel your church forward, but it also helps the wolves that come into your church with the wrong mentality, the wrong heart, that want to come in and hijack your vision. There will be people that will, especially church planter. You're listening to your church planter. There will be people that will come the first couple of years of your church plant, and they're going to try to throw a wrench sometimes into what God has already given you, to sometimes unhealthy and unhealthy places or unhealthy theologies that take you away from the Great Commission as the
Right.
main thing. So, but that's a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole nother podcast. Listen, I'm encouraged by what I see happening in your church, Josh. I'm encouraging when I get to sit around with pastors and hear how God is using when you do get that clarity of vision and direction. It's encouraging because God's going to use that in a powerful way when you have alignment of a body of people, an
Yeah.
alignment of people who are saying, hey, this is the direction we're going, and we're going to put all our efforts, all of our eggs in moving in that same direction. Big things happen when that takes place. And so I hope you're encouraged today, listening in on a little bit of Josh's story. And I'm sure if you wanted to reach out to Josh, Josh would be happy to share
Sure.
more about maybe even the resources and things like that. Josh, give them an email address where they can email you at, or the best way to contact you.
Yeah, I mean, you can always email us at the Pastor Pod, but my email is josh@tbcvenice.com. TBC stands for the Bridge Church. And if any resources I have, I'll be happy to share with you, whatever you need. I mean, I've had a lot of people do that for me. Jay, you're one of those that's passed along a lot of great information to me over the years. So if I can be of help, or Jay can be of help to you, uh, shoot us an email. We'd love to
Yeah.
I'd be happy to give you, talk on the phone or Zoom, or just, we're all for supporting and helping you. So
Yeah, Josh, I was just saying that because I know it's fresh. You're going through it right now. I've had the joy of going through a lot of things here in Boston with training and things like that. A lot of great resources. We'd be happy to, but you can reach us at thepastorpod@gmail.com. You can hit us up on social media, direct message, whatever way is the best way for you to reach out to us. We'd love to come alongside you and your church. We don't want you to have to go through these things alone. I don't want to steal one of my my friends, Bob's saying of don't pastor alone in Jacksonville, but that's really the concept is we don't want you to
that's
have to
right.
go through it and pastor alone. And so if you're listening today and you're going, hey, I'd love to get into all that, but I seem overwhelmed, reach out to us. We'd love to chat with you and maybe encourage you. And
Yeah.
there's little things you can do along the way. I know I've been encouraged by some pastors who've reached out lately going, hey, I'd love to chat about this, or I'd love to chat about that. Yeah, we want to come alongside of you. We really do. We're in this
And
together at the same day. At the end of the day, we're Big C, capital
that's
C
right.
church. We're all in this together.
And we do want you to know, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be sharing some next steps in this way, some dreams that we both have to come along some leaders and pastors. So stay tuned for that. There's there's some things that are cooking that we hope
Ooh.
can just be a lot of fun. But also, for me personally, I'm excited because I'm going to benefit and grow through it. And I know Jay, I'm sure you feel the same way.
Absolutely. I didn't know Josh was going to drop that little snippet there, and we're going to leave you on the edge there, just thinking what could possibly be coming.
Yeah,
I can't
it'll be
wait.
after August. We're looking at some ideas to develop leaders, but yeah,
Like,
I'm just going to stop talking. But hey, listen, we're excited because we want to continue to help develop leaders, and we are the first ones that will probably grow the most. So
absolutely. That's the reason. That's one of the primary reasons we even do this podcast. All things on the table is we love to listen and hear from leaders. And I want to encourage you next week. Make sure you join us. We have another leader coming on the podcast next week that you're going to be encouraged by. So we try to make that a pretty regular thing as we have guests in, people who are way more experienced and have a lot of different, add a lot of value to Josh and I's life. And so listen, stay tuned. We've got some cool things in the works coming up. As Josh was mentioning, that I think about encouraging pastors and supporting pastors, as well as there's a live episode coming up in the near future where we're gonna do an episode live where hopefully we'll be able to interact with you, and we'll be dropping some dates with these things coming up soon, as well as some more special guests. And so as always, we want to thank you for joining us here on the Pastor Pod from Josh and myself. Have a fantastic weekend, and we hope to see you back next week.